blue origin, divine feminine, the moon, downward triangle, womb, vagina, color blue, number 9, divine masculine, the sun, upward triangle, the phallus, color red, number 11. The Freemasons played a symbolic and practical role in the creation of the U.S. Capitol building. Many key figures involved in early American architecture and government, like George Washington, were Freemasons. George Washington laid the cornerstone of the Capitol, a Masonic ceremony, on September 18, 1793, wearing Masonic regalia. This ritual reflected their ideals of enlightenment, order, and sacred geometry. The U.S. Capitol building is symbolically and etymologically linked to the Temple of Saturn in ancient Rome, through its name and purpose. Saturn was associated with time, order, law, and wealth, values important to a republic and mirrored in the functions of the U.S. Capitol. The Founding Fathers looked to Rome as a model republic. By naming it the Capitol, they invoked Rome's golden age, law, and civil order, concept Saturn represented. Saturn is the Roman counterpart to the Greek god Kronos. Saturn was the father of major Olympian gods, like Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, known for devouring his children, to prevent them from overthrowing him, symbolizing time consuming all things. Syncretism is the blending or merging of different religious beliefs, practices, or deities, especially when cultures interact or overlap. In the context of Yahweh and Baal, syncretism played a major role in ancient Israelite religion. The Hebrews, Israelites, emerged in Canaan, from within Canaanite society, not outside of it, where Canaanite religion was deeply established. Canaanites worshipped gods like El, Baal, Asherah, and Anot. Canaan refers to the ancient region encompassing modern-day Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, western Jordan, and parts of Syria. In early texts, Hebrews appear as landless wanderers, shepherds, or laborers within or around Canaanite society. Hebrew is a Canaanite dialect, closely related to Phoenician and Moabite. Israelite religion, script, and legal codes mirror Canaanite structures early on. The Hebrews were not a separate ethnic group. They were socially marginal Canaanites, or outsiders, who gradually formed a new identity. The Israelites were Hebrews, and since Hebrews came from Canaan, the Israelites were originally Canaanites by culture and blood. Over time, Israelite religion rejected its Canaanite roots and redefined itself around monotheism, but its foundation was Canaanite, culturally, religiously, and historically. El was the supreme god, the father of gods and men, associated with wisdom, authority, and creation. El had a divine council, a wife, Asherah, and sons, Baal Hadid being one of them. Asherah was a major Canaanite mother goddess, often associated with fertility, motherhood, and the sea. She was the consort of El, the chief god of the Canaanite pantheon, and at one point, associated with Yahweh in early Israelite religion. Asherah was considered Yahweh's divine consort by some groups, called Queen of Heaven, referred to as Mother of the Gods, often symbolized by a tree, pole, or grove. Asherah, Astarte, Ishtar, and Inanna are related, but not exactly the same goddess. They are part of a goddess archetype that evolved across cultures in the ancient Near East, with overlapping roles and sometimes merged identities. As cultures interacted, through trade, conquest, migration, these goddesses blended and influenced one another. In some regions, Asherah and Astarte were treated as the same or worshipped side by side. All shared common titles, such as Queen of Heaven, Mother of the Gods, etc. El was worshipped widely in the Levant long before Yahweh appeared. Yahweh is not mentioned in early Canaanite text. He likely started as a regional warrior or storm god of nomadic tribes. As these tribes migrated into or arose within Canaan, Yahweh worship was introduced. Earliest references to Yahweh, for example Egyptian texts from 1400s BCE, place him in Edom, Seir, or Midian, southern desert regions south of Canaan. The early Israelites initially shared many cultural and religious practices with their neighbors, worshipping both El and Yahweh, seeing Yahweh as a son of El, or as a manifestation of El. Over time, through syncretism, Yahweh was identified with El, adopting his titles like El Elyon, God Most High, and El Shaddai, God Almighty. Yahweh took over El's role as chief deity, especially as Israelite identity solidified. Eventually, Yahweh absorbed El's functions, taking on his title and role, becoming the sole God of Israel. As Yahweh worship became exclusive and monotheistic, 𝗧𝗍𝗲 was purged from Israelite religion and recast as a symbol of apostasy, though traces of her linger in both archaeology and the biblical text. As mentioned previously, before strict monotheism, Yahweh was worshipped alongside other deities like El, 𝗧𝗍𝗲, and Baal-Hadid. Some tribes or regions worshipped Baal as a national or local deity. Yahweh and Baal were functionally interchangeable for some worshippers. Some Israelites saw Yahweh as a form of Baal. Monotheistic Yahwism didn't fully emerge until much later, likely after the Babylonian exile. Before that, Yahweh's identity was still fluid, and Baal worship was common. Early Israelites used Canaanite rituals, altars, and terminology. Baal of Canaan is a storm and fertility god in opposition to Yahweh in the Hebrew Bible. Seen as a false god or idol, Baal is the son of El in Canaanite myth. Early Israelites viewed Yahweh as their version of Baal, or even used Baal worship practices for Yahweh. The Israelites lived among the Canaanites, intermarried, and adopted many customs. Some local shrines worshipped Yahweh with Baal-style rituals, including high places, sacrifices, and 𝗧𝗍𝗲 poles. Eventually, Israelite religion evolved into strict monotheism, with Yahweh as the one true God and Baal demonized as a false god or rival. In some traditions, especially later demonology, Baal became associated with demonic figures or fallen gods. In the Amos papyrus, Baal-Zephon, is identified with the Egyptian god Horus. This is partly how the eye of Horus becomes the eye of Baal when Canaanite religion moved into Egypt. Baal-Zephon was equated with Horus through syncretism. Classical sources identify 𝗧𝗿𝗱𝗁𝗱 with Baal-Zephon. 𝗧𝗿𝗱𝗁𝗱 is linked to Mount Cassius, where Baal was worshipped. The statue of 𝗧𝗿𝗱𝗁𝗱 in Pelusium was considered an image of Harpocrates, Horus the child. Isis was seen in some traditions, was both the mother and consort of Horus. This reflects how mythologies can evolve, blend, and become symbolically complex over time. In earlier Egyptian mythology, Horus the Elder was a sky god, sometimes associated with Isis as a consort. In later myths, particularly the Assyrian cycle, Horus the Younger became the son of Isis and Osiris. Over time, the lines blurred between Horus the Elder and Horus the Younger, leading to instances where Isis was described simultaneously as mother and symbolic consort, especially in mystical, royal, or cosmological interpretations where divine roles overlapped, for example, kingship rituals, magic, or fertility rites. This duality mirrors other mythological systems like Inanna and Dumuzi or even Mary. Sophia archetypes, where divine figures embody multiple relational roles to represent the unity of life, death, rebirth, and cosmic cycles. So while it's not orthodox in traditional myth, it does appear in syncretic or symbolic interpretations. Both Isis and Astarte were goddesses of fertility, love, and war, and over time, their characteristics were blended due to the movement of peoples, religious exchanges, and cultural overlaps. Both deities were connected to fertility, sexuality, maternal care, and warfare. In times of cultural exchange, especially in the Hellenistic and Roman periods, their worship and iconography often merged. This syncretism made it easier for worshippers to accept new deities, or for rulers to consolidate power under common symbols and myths. As a reminder, Astarte was synonymous with Ishtar and Inanna. A 14th century BCE Ugaritic letter identifies Baal-zephon with Amun, the supreme Egyptian god, reinforcing the syncretic trend. Set, the Egyptian god of chaos and storms, was associated with foreigners and the Hyksos. The Hyksos associated Set with Baal-hadid, due to shared storm god traits. However, Set's association may refer to another Baal variant, for example Baal of Tyre, not necessarily Baal-zephon. Set and Zeus Kosios are not directly equated, but both are linked through Baal-zephon, acting as a chain of cultural equivalence and Greco-Semitic syncretism between Egyptian and Hellenic storm god figures. Set is functionally and symbolically similar to Zeus Kosios through syncretic transmission. The association of the Egyptian god Set with Satan is a modern development rooted in esoteric, occult, and comparative religious interpretations, not in ancient Egyptian theology. Set, also Seth or Sutek, was originally a protector of Ra, god of the desert, storms, chaos, and foreign lands. Over time, Set became the antagonist in Egyptian myth, especially for killing Osiris and battling Horus. Despite this, Set was not evil in the modern moral sense. He had a necessary cosmic role, representing chaos and the balance of duality. Later thinkers began associating Set with Satan based on multiple things, including his role as an adversary, like Satan to God, Set to Horus, his embodiment of chaos, isolation, and rebellion, his association with foreignness and disorder, much like Satan in Christian cosmology, is linked to the fallen, the outrigin. In 1975, Jew Michael Ocquino, a former member of the Jewish Church of Satan, founded the Temple of Set after breaking from Zionist Jew Anton Levy. Ocquino claimed to receive a revelation from Set himself, who declared that he was the true archetype behind Satan, Lucifer, and similar figures. The Temple of Set views Set as a real, conscious being, the embodiment of isolate intelligence, self-awareness, individuality. The association between Satan and Saturn is a complex one, and has evolved over time through a combination of linguistic, symbolic, and cultural associations. Saturn, as a deity in Roman mythology, was associated with time, death, and decay. These characteristics led to him being linked to themes of destruction and limitation, concepts that also became associated with Satan in later Christian theology. Some also link Baal to Moloch, another deity associated with child sacrifice, which later blended with ideas about Saturn's devouring nature. Saturn ruled over the Golden Age, a time of peace and abundance, but was later associated with the dark side of time, involving suffering, hardship, and eventual decline. These darker aspects of Saturn's rule share certain symbolic parallels with Satan's role in Christian theology, particularly as a figure of rebellion, destruction, and opposition to divine order. Saturn in astrology is often associated with limitations, constraints, and the forces of restriction, qualities that can be metaphorically linked to Satan's role in restricting or opposing human potential and divine will. The satanic figure in Christian theology represents rebellion and the breaking of divine laws, while Saturn's role as a deity associated with time and the cycles of life and death can be seen as a force that works against human flourishing and freedom, further reinforcing the idea of restriction or limitation. Saturn's fall from grace in myth, his overthrow by his son Jupiter, also mirrors the fall of Satan in Christian theology. Both figures are associated with rebellion against a higher authority. Saturn's overthrow in the mythic cycle and his subjugation could be seen as symbolically parallel to Satan's rebellion against God and his subsequent fall from heaven. This idea of falling from grace, Saturn being overthrown, Satan falling from heaven, adds a layer of thematic overlap between the two. During the Middle Ages and Renaissance, thinkers and theologians began to draw parallels between mythological figures and biblical ones. as Satan was increasingly seen as a figure of opposition to the divine order. His symbolism of rebellion, time, and death found common ground with the darker aspects of Saturn. Some artistic representations of Satan of the Renaissance even depicted him with horns and a serpent-like form, similar to the older depictions of Saturn in mythology. Further solidifying the connection, both Satan and Saturn are figures that represent the forces of chaos, disorder, and the limitations of the material world. Saturn's role as the god of time and death aligns with Satan's association with the destruction of divine harmony and the limitation of human potential. The connection between Satan and Saturn in Western esotericism or occult traditions is often about the idea of breaking through boundaries, whether those boundaries are moral, Satan, or temporal, Saturn. In this way, the two figures are sometimes symbolically intertwined. While Satan and Saturn were originally distinct figures with different roles and origins in mythology, their symbolic overlap, especially regarding death, limitation, and rebellion, eventually led to their syncretism in various cultural, astrological, and theological contexts. The phonetic similarity between the two names, combined with shared themes of destruction and opposition, contributed to the idea that Satan and Saturn were, in some sense, synonymous or deeply connected in certain mystical or occult traditions. So, in short, through syncretism, Saturn is Kronos, is Baal, is Horus, is Set, is Satan, is Lucifer. Astarte is Ishtar, Inanna, Isis, as well as others.